21st, 2018. We're here at Freeport High School. Everyone is here in attendance tonight. Carter's joining us this evening. I always look over to see which one of our student friends are here with us. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Adjustments to the agenda. We have one.
Yes, I'd like the board to consider a change to the school calendar for this year. And so we're going to move that to unfinished business after the proposed calendar for next year.
Okay. So we are on to public comment. So if we have anybody who wants to get up and share, we have two spots on the agenda tonight, one now and one after our deliberation and other items. So
Thank you.
Three spots for public input.
we do?
Yeah, one, there's public comment, and then there's public input related
To the budget.
To the budget.
That's right, yep.
And then,
We want to hear from you a lot today.
Not on the budget. My name's Tom Landsbergen. I'm a father of 3 children in the RSU 5 school district. Obviously, very vested interest in the quality of our schools. I attended the last school board meeting, and I had an opportunity to hear many of the parents' voice their concern over the proposed change to our students' grading system. I was very, very impressed with the activism in the community. I think it speaks a lot to how much we care about our schools. And in particular, the suggestion to move our grading scale from 1 to 4. I will stand here today and say right off the bat, I'm strongly opposed to the suggestion that a 1 to 4 scale has any incremental benefit to the students. From a practical perspective, a 1 to 4 grading scale isn't really even an accurate statement. Judging from my son, it really should be 1 to 3.5. If it's not possible to get a 4, the scale should be 1.3, 1 to 3.5. When a student scores a perfect score on a test that should be awarded a 4.0 grade, they're not. They're given a 3.5. The need for a student to do extra work to generate a 4.0 should not be a prerequisite to getting a 4.0. When a student in a different school system gets 100, they get an A. In Freeport, they get a 3.5. It makes no sense to me. The score simply of 100 or 78 or 87, that number speaks for itself. There's no ambiguity. There's no need for interpretation. There's no vagueness. I constantly monitor my children's academic progress, and it does not make sense to me, our grading system. More importantly, it is completely confusing and frustrating for my child because there is no point in making improvement if it is not going to be recognized. One of the parents used the word homogenized. I thought that was perfect. Grades are homogenized. A 1 to 100 grading system has been around forever. It is understood by everyone. We are spending precious resources to reinvent the wheel. Very recently, my middle school son had informed me that he had gotten 1 problem wrong out of 20, and that other students had gotten 3 wrong in the same test. Surprise, surprise, they all got the same score. 19 out of 20 to me means 95%. 3 out of 20 ain't 95%, it's 85%. Somebody explain to me how that could possibly be. Makes no sense. Imagine what it does to the student when they want to do a little bit better. Is 95% a 3? Is it 3.5? Is it 4? Can anybody here tell me what it is? I beg to differ. If we had all teachers here, they couldn't give you the same straight answer. Why the complexity? 1 to 100. I get a 78. Somebody else gets an 82. We all know where each person stands. No need for interpretation. I have not met, I should say, after we spoke at the last meeting, I met with everybody in the back, and I asked everybody sincerely, please tell me, because I'm an open-minded person, please tell me the theoretical benefit to moving to this new grading system. Regardless of where you stand on this issue, can anybody explain to me the real benefit? I have yet to hear an argument that makes us want to reinvent the wheel and change what we have, or what we used to have, I should say. We are contemplating making a major change to how we evaluate students' academic achievement, yet we still do not know what the actual benefit is. This might be a reflection of the school's lack of communication with the RSU 5 community, or perhaps there really is no benefit. I'm an open-minded person. I would suggest that perhaps we schedule a meeting where the folks who are proponents of this defend their positions to the parents, the taxpayers. Unique idea. In summary, I, for one, am completely against keeping the 1 to 4 grading scale in favor of a 1 to 100 scale commonly used by everyone. A transparent grading scale benefits everyone. Teachers, students, parents all know where the student stands with a 1 to 100 scale. No ambiguity, no guessing, no masking potential underachievers, and no holding back overachievers. This is not good for anybody. I've heard a lot of proponents of high-end, high achiever parents. This is bad for low-end achievers. It masks deficiencies in what they're doing. Transparency is good for everybody. If RSU, and this is an unfortunate statement, it has to be made, if RSU 5 retains this convoluted grading scale, I will regretfully consider enrolling my two of my children in the Yarmouth school system, because the older, God bless, he doesn't have to be prone to this. This would be a very sad day given the friendships they have built over the years and the respect I have for this school system and the teachers in it. Appreciate your time, and I look to the school board for leadership here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Grimm. I have 2 children in the middle school. I'm here tonight to again remind you that you must take action and remove the 1 to 4 grading system. The 1 to 4 system is a clearly flawed grading method that is and will continue to cheat our children. Students cannot be experiments. All of us here tonight are motivated in some way every day to get out of bed and start a new day, whether it be your job, your work, your family, etc. Being motivated is an essential part of a general well-being and happiness. It's what makes us all tick. Over the past 3 years, with the current 1 to 4 system, I have seen in my 2 children a loss of enthusiasm, determination, ambition, and incentive to do their best in school. They have the ability to excel and are very capable, but we see their motivation being stripped away from them day by day, year after year, with these 1 to 4 grades. Just this week, I heard my 13-year-old say, "Mom, I'm good. I'm meeting standards." The incentive for him to strive for higher achievement has vanished. The schoolwork my kids do that doesn't count is often sloppy and careless. What will happen as time goes on for students who aren't motivated? Loss of interest, dropping grades, dropping classes, depression, and I wonder what will happen to their general well-being and happiness. This 1 to 4 system so far has cost an incredible amount of time, energy, confusion, lack of direction, and consistency, ever-changing criteria, and for what? So far, very negative outcomes for my 2 kids. From what I understand, the 1 to 4 system was put in place to help failing students from dropping out of school. We need to find a better solution, support system, or pathway for those students. There is too much at stake here. Do the right thing, take action as superintendent and board members, and vote to end 1 to 4, implement 1 to 100 for the start of the school year this fall. And please give students the incentives they need to excel in their education, well-being, and future. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
I'm actually here on behalf of Jason and Chrissy Berry. They couldn't be here this evening, but they did write a letter to the RSU Board of Directors. They have a son in 8th grade and another son in 5th grade, so not quite the high school level, but this does affect them. It says, Dear RSU 5 Board of Directors, I'm writing to inform you of my, hang on a second. There we go. Of my position related to my experience with the proficiency-based grading system. Based on my experience and online research, there appears to be a disconnect between written policy and the application of these policies. Second, I'm concerned the habits of work grading can be subjective. Overall, this leads to a lack of confidence in rolling out the proficiency-based grading system. My son Thomas, part of the class of 2021 and beyond, according to RSU 5's transcripts and academic achievement policy, revised September 27, 2017, is at the forefront of this newly implemented grading system. According to the policy, honors may be achieved if all course grades are 3.25 or higher, and high honors achieved if all course grades are 3.75 or better. However, my son's report card states that honors is achieved with a 3 or higher in all courses, and high honors is 3 grades, 3.5 or higher. Why are these two not aligned? Frankly, I'm confused because I have never seen a grade with a 0.25 or 0.75 on PowerSchool. The habits of work grading is subjective to teachers' interpretation of the students. Particularly, how can a uniform grading of determination be applied fairly and uniformly? My son can earn a 4 for respect, 3.5 for preparedness, 4 for engagement, and yet receive a 2.5 for determination. This is from his report card. How, as a parent, do I interpret the 2.5 and coach him to improve his determination? In conclusion, I am not totally against the proficiency-based grading system. However, at this time, I would request the board to maintain the traditional grading system of A to F, 0 to 100, until such time that policies and administration of them are aligned and there is a clear understanding for teachers and parents in regards to the habits of work grading guidelines that will be administered uniformly. The implementation of the proficiency-based grading system has turned our children into guinea pigs who will only suffer consequences to their future. Sincerely, Jason and Chrissy Berry.
Thank you.
Hi. My name is Pam Berry Santos. I live in Freeport, and I have a child at Mass Landing. And I just took really quick notes right before the meeting, so if it's jumbled or not quite clear, I apologize ahead of time. My concern is proficiency-based diploma that's defined by the state legislation is not proficiency-based grading. They're not the same thing. It wasn't required by the state legislation, and we're implementing it. The state didn't mandate that. The grading component is a result of DOE trying to interpret from the law that is a little bit vague on how to roll this out and get this going so that kids can have proficiency-based diplomas. There's no one way to do it. Yarmouth, Cumberland, Cape Elizabeth, and even Lewiston, they're rolling, well, those 3 districts didn't even roll out the 1 to 4 grading. Lewiston is rolling it back. They just announced that 2 days ago. They're going back to 0 to 100. I can appreciate the goal of trying to bring all the kids up to being labeled as proficient, saying on their diploma they're proficient. But without the state defining how to objectively measure this, each district is defining things on their own. And that defeats the purpose of the goal of standardizing if there are no agreed upon standards. All I could find is that there should be objective measures of proficiency. To me, 0 to 100 seems like it's an existing objective way to measure. For proficiency-based education and grading, I can't find any evidence that it's effective in improving educational outcomes. If anyone here has any information, any academic research that wasn't created or funded by the organizations that sell their services to establish proficiency-based education and grading systems, I would love to see it. I have yet to see how this is an improvement just in general. Comments of concern that I heard at the last meeting, when I hear somebody say we've gained good ground and let's not lose the progress we've made, that bothers me. Do we really think that the reason to continue with something that might be flawed is that we've already spent time and money on it? We're not talking about something trivial like whether we eat a sandwich and that we've made because we're rethinking the ingredients and the order in which we layered them. We're talking about our children's educational foundations. If we're saying we can't talk about whether it really is a good plan because it's too late, because we've gotten 50% of the way through it, and it's only now that we're starting to see the cracks in the foundation, then we're not doing our job as parents. You don't patch cracks in the foundation and cross your fingers and call it a day because things might get messy or your previous work will be lost. To clarify, there's no consensus on the best way of doing things. Saying that there is doesn't make it true. Trying to deny or trivialize concerns people have doesn't make those concerns less valid. There's a reason why the word reevaluate exists. You don't just stop thinking about how well something may or may not be working because you've started down the path of using it. Sure, it stinks to think of lost hours and money, but it stinks more if hundreds of kids become guinea pigs in an untested system, and then they end up with a diploma that has no meaning or objective value outside the bubble of your own school district. Just because we started down a path and we're too proud to say, you know what, you have some valid points, maybe we should reevaluate what we're doing in light of everyone's concerns. And at this point, everyone is looking a lot like it's more than just our district. So many people are talking about this outside RSU 5. Concerns that I have with my kid, he's in 3rd grade. He can't get a 4 to save his life. And he can get a perfect score on a test, but it doesn't equate to a 4. So he's not motivated. If he gets a perfect score, he misses 3 and he gets the same thing, what's the point in studying? Because without studying, he gets the exact same result. Everything that he gets, he needs to be motivated. Lots of kids can get by, lots of kids can be meeting. And, we're lucky because they can do that, but it doesn't motivate them to do anything if they're never going to get anything beyond a 3 or a 3.5. A perfect score doesn't motivate them. One of the things that Mass did recently to get him motivated, they were told that if X% of kids do something or get a perfect score, then Mrs. Grimm would kiss an animal. That motivated my kid. He knew that if he got a perfect score, I think it was on a spelling test, then there was a payoff. If he's going to get a 3, whether he puts effort into something or not, my kid's not going to work to get anything beyond that 3 because he doesn't have to. He knows that getting a 4 is like finding a 4-leaf clover. My other concern is the lack of transparency. My kid's in 3rd grade. I found out about this because somebody who has a kid in 8th grade is on the Nordic ski track, and it was being talked about at the Nordic ski team meeting. I have no idea how it came about, but that's how I found out about it. Other schools have posted info online. The 3 districts I mentioned earlier, I went online, found information, found a recording, found a printout, a whole presentation. They've talked about what their plans are. At last week's meeting, there was talk of who's been informed, and it was all 8th grade and older students and parents, as though kids of younger parents don't need to be informed of an overhaul to the education and grading systems that affect every kid in it. Part of this education reform at the state level, I think it was mentioned by the DOE, called for districts to do self-assessments. Step 5 was community engagement, and it said to engage students, parents, and the public about proficiency-based learning. There were a whole bunch of sub-steps under that. If this district has done a self-assessment, I would love to see the results of that, because this was something that the DOE said should be done. I can't find any evidence of it online. Maybe it's because I only moved here a 1.5 years ago that I can't find it, and maybe it was given out to everyone. But when I do a search on the RSU 5 website, I see no evidence of it, and the only talking points on there are aimed at middle schoolers and high schoolers. My kid's in 3rd grade. I'm still concerned about this. He's going through this system. My final comment is I heard a few grumblings about how all of this exists because one political party shoved it through. And I can tell you that in the 2 weeks I've put into thinking about researching this, it's not aligned with any party. Votes for and against the legislation came from both sides. I went back and I looked at the actual votes by party affiliation, and I can guarantee you that right now I'm agreeing with people today who I never thought I'd agree with when it comes to politics. This isn't a partisan issue. Placing blame distracts, as it always does, from the bigger issue. We need to put the changes on hold and reevaluate this. We need some sort of evidence-based research to show that this is in any way beneficial to the kids. because we already know that how this is being implemented and the new grading system, neither of those are required by the legislation. It doesn't have to be exactly this way. I'm all for improving outcomes and helping our kids be more competitive with their peers and with themselves. It's a big reason why we moved across the country. But not all changes are progress. And doing something just to say you're doing something doesn't make any sense, especially when it could be causing harm instead of moving our kids forward. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Kristen Dorsey from Freeport. And I spoke here last week about my family's personal experience and perception about the 1-to-4 grading system, which was not positive. And I also listened and I felt validated by several articulate, skilled parents who have done their due diligence in analyzing the issues with RSU 5's process, rollout, and ongoing execution of standards-based learning. And the merits and interpretations of standards-based learning really, for me, need to be left to another day. And then I've had 2 occurrences over the last 2 weeks the last week that have brought me up here. One was a message from the principal at Freeport High School that the 3rd quarter, despite all the snow days, will end on March 30th. So we don't really have any time to spare. My ask last week was that the board vote to abandon the 1-to-4 grading system at the end of the 3rd quarter. The other thing was I had my parent-teacher conferences. I met with 2 sets of teachers, ones that are working with my freshmen and ones that are working with my seniors. And those conversations that I had with all of those teachers really confirmed what I've heard and what I have had growing concern about over the past several years, is that teacher morale is really dropping quickly. There's not a sense of ownership or investment in this all-consuming standards-based learning conversion, and certainly not the grading system. So my question tonight is that I would like to have answered is if the board or the superintendent could clarify what the process and the timeline is for the board to bring that to a vote to abandon the 1-to-4 grading system. At another meeting, when this was, to my knowledge, it was the first meeting at which that ask was made, like, would you consider eliminating the 1-to-4 grading system? And administrators' response was they suggested that doing something like that would diminish the public's trust. And that, to me, like, that is farthest from the truth. And in conversations with other parents, it's actually the opposite. And in thinking about that response too, it just came flooding back into my brain. The question, is it good for kids? Which was sort of a big billboard that RSU 5 was using over the last couple of years. I don't know who came up with that, but this is not about the adults and decisions they've made or not made, or just that things that have evolved. But my sense is that if the board is responsive to a growing group of people, it's not just a few people, that you'd really be modeling the mindset that we're asking our kids to have as lifelong learners, and that growth mindset, and that disposition that you will step back and analyze what's going on and rework your decisions and your thought process to move forward and upward and kind of expand what you're doing. So I would like to know tonight what the time frame is, and I personally really insist that it happen, that a vote be taken, and a a parent who has way more energy than I do at this point, actually opened up a website. It's www.rsu5parents.org, and they took it upon themselves. There's just article upon article of local Maine, like just educational articles and things that are going on. And it's also an opportunity for parents to sign on and say, yes, I support abandoning the 1 to 4 grading system. So I ask that that conversation be had hastily. Thanks.
Thank you, Kristen.
Hello, my name is Camille Maltempi, and I have 3 children in the RSU 5 school system, a sophomore in high school, an 8th grade in the middle school, and a 5th grader in Mass Landing. I'm all over the place. Okay, so my son, who's a sophomore in all honors classes here at the high school, and luckily he was grandfathered into the 0 to 100 system of grading. He told me this story, which kind of bothered me. He told me that it's impossible for the freshman in his honors math class to get a 4 on an exam, while my son, who's a sophomore, can get an A. He said they're really upset with that because they're doing the same work, but yet they're graded differently. My 2 children that are in 5th and 8th grade respectively are on different ends of the grading spectrum. My 8th grader is pretty much self-motivated, and he's frustrated that it's almost impossible for him to get a 4, even if he scores 100 on a test. My 5th grader, on the other hand, is not really motivated, and she kind of flies under the radar. So this grading system for her masks her underperformance and groups her in with everyone else. It's imperative that we do away with the 1 to 4 system immediately before we lose the students to other school districts. It would be a shame for our children to change schools because we're really vested in the school system. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're getting close to your normal time. I'll try and be quick. Thank you all for what you do. I know it's hard work and you're just citizens serving. One thing that just became clear last night talking to my eldest daughter who's
Could
a
you just
junior.
tell us your name?
I'm sorry, Jay Parada. I'm from Freeport. Two students, a junior and a freshman at Freeport High School. 2 things from last night and today became clear. Talking to our eldest daughter, who's a junior, she said that she could achieve 3 grades on a test, or 3 possible grades, a 98, a 93, or an 88. Just those 3. Those are the 3 outcomes you could get. Because a 98 was a 4, a 93 is a 3.5, and an 88 is a 3. So it's the first time I'd ever heard those 2 things so firmly conjoined, the 1 to 4 and the 0 to 100. Now she's a junior. She's not part of the freshman class that we're talking about. So that established for me that a 3 is an 88 in my parlance, something that I can understand at 54 years old and we can all understand. And so the proficiency-based education legislation says that every student to get a proficiency-based diploma must get a 3 in every subject. So what you're saying is that every student in Freeport High School is going to have to get an 88 average in every course to graduate. I talked to Dr. Foley tonight, she confirmed this. So the class of 2021, everybody in that class has to have an 88 average in every course to graduate. I think you said 38% of the juniors are not proficient, or not meeting standards. Are not meeting standards, or no, 38% were meeting standards in the junior class, which means that if that junior class were to graduate today, 62% of those would not graduate. Per the legislation, 62%. You think you got mad parents here. Wait until that freshman class comes through the end of the course and 62% aren't graduating because they don't all have 3s. So then what do you do as you're a teacher, administrator, or a student? You could spend extraordinary amounts of time and effort, extra time to get those students all up to a 3. That would be the goal, and that's the goal of the legislation. We don't have any of that. So what do? You water down. You make an 88 a 3, which nobody understands, and then you water it down, right? That's what any business would do, any person would do, anyhow. Just want to say that's what I learned. 88 equals 3. Everybody has to have an 88. And the only way that's going to happen is if you water that down. I think that's what's being done. I would encourage us to go back to a 0 to 100 scale that we all understand, not water it down. And if kids need to get up to it, we need to vote as a community to spend the time and resources, the money. You're going to need 10, 15 more teachers. You're going to need extra time, extra resources. It's the only way you get those people up. You don't do it by changing the system. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just came in here in the nick of time. I'm Peg Sellian. I spoke last week. Have a couple children in freshman and junior level here at Freeport High School, and we've been talking about this for a number of years, going all the way back to Shannon Walsh, and Brian Campbell. And when they came in, they had communicated that there was this state mandate of a proficiency-based education system that we need to adopt. We listened. We asked a lot of questions, and at least from my perspective, I will say that I walked away with the understanding that we had a certain number of standards that we had to meet. It was on a 1 to 4 scale. I understood all the rubrics, and I trusted that that's what was being mandated by the state. Drilled down a lot with Brian about, how you get from a 3 to a 4, what does, various adverbs mean that get you from a 3 to a 4, for example. A lot of discussion around that. So when I realized that this was something that we had no choice in, we had to do this was a state mandate, okay, fine. So I tried to put my brain around it, wrapped around it, try to get an understanding of it. I knew that there were some trials and tribulations along the way in that journey. I knew there were things with Power School along the lines with middle school doing their level best to bring in what was required and asked of them. But unfortunately, all these years, up until now, it wasn't until January where I said, I'm learning about all these other schools, that aren't adopting that grading of 1 to 4. They embrace the standards, which I embrace. I embrace a lot of things about the proficiency-based education. But the grading, and there's some other things too, like 3.0 for everybody. Not everybody can achieve that. There are some people who just have that track where they're great at arts, or they're great at doing something from a trades perspective. And we need all of those people. We don't want everybody to be proficient necessarily in math and science. We want them to be proficient in some other things that maybe not everybody can be proficient in. So getting back to the grading of 1 to 4, it didn't dawn on me, and I'm an intelligent person, but it didn't dawn on me until this January to say, I need to look at the bill that was passed. It's over 900 pages. I had my kids read the bill as well. And I'm like, am I missing something here? What are we supposed to be implementing here? And it boiled down to our interpretation as we have 8 content areas that we need to, and that's being now negotiated in terms of efficiencies or proficiencies that these students need to achieve. But how we do it and how we assess the proficiency in each individual student, in each individual standard, is at the discretion of the teacher. There is nothing written in law or by the state that says you have to do it this way. You have to grade 1 to 4. There's nothing written by the state that indicates how we have to do it. It's up to the district and how we implement this. I applaud having a set of math standards. If a student wants to pursue math, great. Here's a set of standards that you need to learn by. So if someone in Freeport High School wants to learn math, and here and over in Florida, for example, they want to learn that same math class, they've all learned the same standards. But if they don't want to pursue math, that's okay. They can pursue science or something else. But there's a set of standards at which you can assess these students And you can say, okay, I get it, 1 to 100, that's what we're all familiar with. They reached 100 or a 90 or an 80 in that standard that's common nationwide. Everybody understands what that 80 means for that math, that science, that art, music, whatever that may be. I talked to Paul Hamilton. I called even the commissioner. I couldn't get a hold of him. And I wanted to hear from them personally. What is your vision? What is your mandate? And he confirmed for me, no, it's really up to the discretion of the schools. So from my perspective, I want to ask myself, how did I get here? Because I listened to the superintendents. I know we've had, and I respect the fact that there's been a turnover in superintendents and principals. It's really hard to pass that information on. So I get how we can get here at this point, I do. Because we've had what? There was Shannon, there was Ed, now we've got Becky, we've got these principals that have also turned over. So that's kind of inherent in this problem as well. So where we are today and trying to figure out how did we get here, how did we get to that point where this is what we had to do? We had to grade 1 to 4. We had to make sure everybody reached a 3.0. And how do we define a 3.0? Who decides that? And those are the questions that still remain outstanding for me, but I trusted that in the administration from years ago, that this is what we had to do. But it took reading a bill, a 900-plus page bill, back in January to figure out we didn't really have to do it this way. And this now helps us explain why other schools are doing it a little bit differently that works for them. And a lot of other schools who have adopted this 1 to 4 are rolling back to the 1 to 100 because it just makes more sense. I also went through an article that I referenced last week. Schools that have adopted this proficiency-based education. And the Sumner School, RSU 24, I talked to the guidance counselors there, and they've shared a lot of the same growing pains that we have. And one of the things that really stood out for me was their #1 class student. Because proficiency-based education, it's not about class rank, right? It's all about meeting the standard. There's no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 class ranking, right? You met the standard. It's not about the grade, right? It's about 1, 2, 3, 4. You met the standard. So in this case, this particular student who ranked #1 applied for a scholarship. Guess what? She was denied. You know why? Her transcript didn't look a lot like the other traditional transcripts. And so for the Sumner School, RSU 24, they had to go back. That was a big learning for them. Did she ever get her scholarship? Yes. The school had to call and work with the university, and they intervened, and they explained what their grading process was. She eventually got her $8,000 scholarship, but not by all alone the proficiency-based transcript that we would normally maybe submit. They had to put in a class rank. They had to put in, here's what a 1 to 4 is defined. A 3 is defined as an 87. A 4 is defined as this. But they had to do all of that translation in the transcript. There was a lot that they had to do above and beyond what they normally thought they had to do in order to communicate to the universities of Maine as to what would qualify for a scholarship. So she got it. But my point here is students shouldn't have to go to that level. They should be able to do what they're doing, have their transcripts tell the story. Yes, there's above and beyond what they have to also show what they can do outside of their academics. But it shouldn't take a school profile, your guidance counselor, the school intervening to help you explain how this student has performed. So my plea to you is to really please reconsider the grading of 1 to 4 back to a 1 to 100 before these kids finish out their 4th quarter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. give folks a sec. Okay. About this? You want to do it? 'Cause I didn't know that.
So just to respond to the question about when is the board going to kind of grapple with this, we have, for the April 11th workshop, we have it down to do a workshop on this with the board and to present information on, to provide clarity on a lot of these issues. And so that would be kind of the next step that we're looking at.
Can I get clarification on the board's process for agenda items? Workshop to me means there's no vote. It's educational for board members in the community, and there's board discussion about an issue to try to increase all of our understanding. But it's my understanding that votes typically don't happen in a workshop. What is the agenda item?
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think historically we used to have business meetings and workshop meetings.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything that prevents us from having a vote at any of our meetings.
Oh, okay.
So I think we title it workshop in that it's to provide information. Typically, if we put something on here for a vote, it's unusual if we don't take the vote on it, whereas if it's a workshop, it doesn't necessarily imply there has to be a vote. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
So for that workshop, Becky, would it be possible to provide the board with all this survey data from staff and students that has been collected over the winter? Because none of us have seen it, and I think that's a very important.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that was sort of my thought on what that workshop would be, is that it's sort of the aggregation of the information from our administrators that are rolling it out, from the survey information from the 9th graders, from basically everyone we've collected information and data from on this process.
Yes, and to me, the two issues that are, well, I guess there really are three what I would consider like hot topic issues underneath proficiency right now that you've been hearing a lot about. One of those is the pathway to the 4. Is there a clear pathway to the 4? And we'll update you on our work around that. There's the issue about the grading as we've moved it into 9th grade, and the concerns that we're hearing. And so we're going to talk about that. And around the call, you just heard some more comments tonight about, are our kids competitive in getting into other colleges? So we're going to try to roll all of that into, probably an hour or something close to that.
Okay. Yeah, Maddie.
I just want to clarify, you mentioned aggregation. I would like to see the raw data. I don't want to be presented to about the survey data. I would like everyone on the board to have a chance to see the raw data from the surveys.
So I guess I'm not prepared to say that's possible right now, because some of that is some of those are in notes, so so I'm not sure. I'd have to probably work with Michelle on what that might look like. So we've had, I think it was 2, I'm looking at Charlie. Where's Charlie? Thank you. We had 2 parent meetings, and so we did collect names, but we took notes. They're collecting student input. It's not a, definitely on the satisfaction survey that we did, something like that, we are just now aggregating, and it would be, yes, you'll eventually get what I would call all of the data, but I'm going to have to read through, for example, all of the comments and probably redact things that I would find, that have particular people's names in there and different things like that. I just don't know if it's possible to have all of that kind of stuff done by the 11th. So it's possible to aggregate and give you kind of the summary of what we're seeing, but I wouldn't think that in an hour we could take you through all of the raw data. So maybe I'm not understanding what you're requesting, Maddie.
I would like to see the raw data in advance of the meeting and have an opportunity to read through it. And I understand some sensitivities and the feeling that you might want to redact some of that information, but if we put this survey out to the public and they made comments, I think everybody on the board, probably not the whole public, but certainly
nothing
everyone.
that comes to the board is not public. Everything we get has to be. So, I mean, for personnel issues or kids' names issues, I mean, you got to pull that stuff out.
So I'm not saying I'm not willing to try to do that. I just don't know, sitting here right now, exactly what that's going to look like. And so I just am not going to promise something that I may have to later say, I can't deliver on that exactly.
I'm not going to feel comfortable voting one way or the other without the opportunity to dig into that personally, and I would like my colleagues to be able to do the same.
So I do have a question about what kind of survey data we have. The satisfaction survey data is not really relevant to this conversation. There were no questions in that survey about this point specifically, PBE, the grading, the path to a 4, college admissions, none of that. So I don't expect that survey to glean too much information that we can actually become informed through reading. But the high school principal and assistant principal had mentioned that they had conducted some type of staff survey. I'm not familiar with exactly what that survey was about, but it was mentioned in the context of a PBA discussion. And they were also polling students informally, but I also had the impression that there may have been some actual survey data for the students. Could you clarify what all that was about, and were there any cut and dry surveys that
I'm
have been
going to have
conducted?
Charlie before I misspeak, because Charlie, why don't you come up and clarify, because I think you guys have asked for data in a couple of ways, and so go ahead. Thanks.
So most of the data that we've gotten is through meetings with different stakeholders, parent meetings, meetings with students, and meetings with staff. We have no surveys. We've never given an actual survey which gives us numbers and things like that. It's more meetings, and then the notes we've taken from those meetings and things like that.
So Charlie, how comprehensive are those meetings? I mean, how many students, what percentage of students were surveyed or talked to, and same with staff?
Yeah. So the staff, I mean, we've talked to all the staff about it twice now. Not all the staff the second time, but all the 9th grade teachers the second time. And then with parents, there was 2 parent meetings. I can't remember exactly how many people were at both meetings. You were at one of the meetings, yeah. And then with students, those are ongoing. We're still talking to students. We haven't finished those. We're having lunches with them, bringing them in, talking to them in small groups, getting their feedback.
You did also send home some type of survey to parents, to the 9th grade parents a couple of times, correct? Jen did.
Okay, maybe Jen did. Maybe, yeah. I haven't seen that one, but yeah.
Sir.
Why just the 9th grade parents?
I think the thought was this is where it was being rolled out, and we're trying to gather their feedback about what's working, what's not, that kind of thing. So if you're a 10th grade parent, you don't really, when you're not living it, you don't have a perspective on it. And for the other grades, pre-K through 8, we've now been doing this type of system for, most of the principals can't remember a different type of system. So that's why it was the 9th grade.
Okay, so I guess...
real quick.
Oh, sorry, Sarah.
That's okay. Hi, Charlie.
Hi.
So, what was the point of getting together and talking with the students and the parents about this? What was the point of the survey, and what did you intend to do with the information once you got it?
Well, the point, and this is a new system, as we're hearing, we want to get feedback from the stakeholders on how it's working and what is working, what is not working. And so we want to use that feedback to, adjust or not, depending on the feedback we're getting.
So how would you adjust? Would you bring it to us? What is the system for adjusting?
I mean,
how much flexibility is there in order to adjust?
I mean, well, there's certain things that are decided at the board level. There's certain things that are decided at the school level. So we would definitely want to work in partnership with the board in deciding what needs to be adjusted and what doesn't.
So the reason I asked the question is, did you intend to bring the information from those meetings to the board? And do you have it in a form that would be shareable to the board?
I mean, like we said, most of that information is in note form, and I think it can certainly be shared after we kind of go through it and remove names and things like that. I mean, yeah. I mean, my penmanship isn't very good, so keep that in mind. But otherwise, yeah, we can definitely.
My only point being is that I think in the future, maybe, that this information should be gathered in such a way that is shareable, that maybe we think about the process of taking surveys and making them anonymous, removing personal information or whatever, so that we all sort of have an understanding of what's happening, and we're more informed so that we can better vote.
Sure.
To help everybody.
Yeah.
We're all in this together.
Understand.
I'm just going to tell you, nobody can hear you at home. Unfortunately, we can't have folks because they don't.
What's your legal team say? Because what you're doing is wrong. It's wrong. You cannot just decide by a superintendent and principal to decide this is how you're going to handle Pownell, Freeport, and Durham. So, period. So you got to think about that pretty quick.
Okay, so
Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah.
So before we move on, could I make a request that if the principal and assistant principal of any of the schools that have information that is shareable, that they remove names and information that cannot be shared, and that it be brought forth to the board?
I agree. I mean, I think
you.
that's the expectation of this meeting on the 11th.
With time before the 11th.
So yeah, typically we get our packages the previous Thursday, so that gives everyone the time to review and the same time they're available to the public. Lindsay.
I'd like to make some other requests for information to be presented at the workshop. I'd like a 5-minute presentation on the benefits of the 1 to 4 system. We've been hearing a lot about the benefits of the 0 to 100, and I think it's been a valid request to have a concise presentation about the intention and the benefits of the 1 through 4 specifically. I would like a copy of the current transcript for a 9th grade student, obviously not a specific one, but what are we looking at for these particular students? What's on their transcript right now? I would like a list of schools that have chosen not to use the 1 through 4 system, and I would like to know how many of those schools relative to the total number of schools in the state for high school. I would like to know...
Is that easily accessible? I mean,
Well-
I'm not saying we can't ask, but I mean, there's 200 and something high schools.
How about
Yes,
in a cohort?
We can do our
yes.
cohort.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, that is, and I'm happy to, for the ones where we can gain it, I'm happy to do that. But I don't know of a place where like the DOE has collected that. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but I'm happy to do the
cohort's
cohort.
not that big, so
No,
we'll just,
10.
And if it's unknown, if we've got one that's unknown, just put unknown. But I
Oh,
just,
no, I can definitely
So
do
the
the cohort.
MEA is also really involved in this, and they may have that data as well.
Okay. I'd like to continue with my list, if that's possible. I would like, oh my goodness, that was not, hopefully they
Mine
can hear
was
it through
on.
yours. Okay. I would like to hear, because this is kind of an extraordinary time, and this is difficult for me to say, I hope the administrators and superintendent won't take offense, but I have not heard the voice of teachers in this, and I find that making any kind of decision without that key stakeholder group extremely uncomfortable. So I would like at least an opportunity for some representative of teachers, and I understand that that puts teachers in kind of a weird position too politically, but perhaps what about the MEA? Could they make a 5-minute statement on,
Or even our union, not necessarily the.
I mean, yeah, our union. Maybe they could make a 5-minute presentation on their views on changing the 1 through 4 specifically to the 0 to 100. I think that's the issue that is most acute right now and that needs a decision at the board level, like immediately. So I would like to focus if we do have the opportunity to have teacher feedback, I would like it to focus specifically on that. And then I would like to hear somebody talk about, I don't know if it's the superintendent, the administrators, whoever, about an alternate short-term or long-term way for our district to determine proficiency that would define the legal obligations of the state statute, but not do the 1 through 4. So, I've had this, like, the idea jump to my head, like, if we went to the 0 to 100, could you say that a certain score, like, say 70%, or 75, what have you. So that's one way of thinking about it. Are there other ways of thinking about achieving the mandate? And that's the end of my list. Thank you.
Carter.
I actually have a question for Mr. Mellon, if he's still here. So you said something about meetings that you had conducted with students. Were all of those students freshmen?
Yes.
Well, being only freshmen? Only freshmen. So being a senior, even though I was grandfathered into the system of 0 to 100, during middle school and beforehand, I had been a part of the 1 to 4 kind of scale. And I think that I would suggest that if you are going to have meetings, you would consider pulling in students from those upper grades, because we've been in both. And we have a perspective on both.
Yeah.
Like, we can tell you if it's easier to be 0 to 100 or 1 to 4, and we can give you that, because freshmen, like, if they were in middle school and grades beforehand, they only had 1 to 4, they
Right.
can only give you that perspective.
Right.
You can't hear from 0 to 100 because they've never done it before.
Yeah. Okay, good. Appreciate that. Thank you.
And I
Cor-
would pigtail on that the 10th grade in particular is a great cohort to poll to, because they do live with the rubrics and the standards, but they are graded in the 0 to 100 scale.
Well, in the 11th grade, it did both their freshman year. They switched, so they would have
that's right.
perspective.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Carter. And the only thing I would say on Lindsay's list, which I think is a great one for information, as it relates to alternatives and specifically around the feedback from the teachers, is what I hate to do is for us to take a vote and have the law of unintended consequences where we dump this in our teachers' laps and say, hey, okay, guys, starting on Monday, you're 1 to 100. And I fear that might be a big ask for our teachers who have spent, the last 2 years developing these rubrics on the 1 to 4. And, it could be that if we decide that 1 to 4 is not the way to go and 1 to 100 is, like, how do we get there and not overburden our teachers that are already working really hard? And maybe they would say, hey, we could flip the switch tomorrow, but I don't want to make that assumption for them. So
maybe the teacher present or the union presentation that Lindsay's
Right.
suggesting, they could come
Have some
with some
feedback on that.
ideas specifically around that.
Yeah, that was sort of my thought, so.
Guys,
We
no.
can't, guys. We have a process, and we have to, I mean, we had public comment, we have public comment at the end. If you want to speak again, you can do that, but we have a full budget agenda that we have to do. So I appreciate everyone's comments. They've been duly noted. We wanted to make sure people recognize that there's going to be a session on the 11th to hopefully provide some clarity and some options and some next steps. So, okay. Now we're on to the presentation.
Okay. Get clear.
It's coming in. Let's just take a second. I think you gotta go back a couple pages. There you go.
So good evening. The last time I presented this, I think it was January 24th. So it really is the same PowerPoint, but with updated numbers. But I'll also go through it because we have a lot of people in the audience. And so just to remind everyone that our mission is to provide our students with a world-class education that will challenge minds, engage creativity, develop self-discipline, and advance inherent strengths. Last year, the board funded stipends so we could have a unified basketball team. That's been very, very successful this year, and we appreciate the funding for that. The board adopted an overarching goal last year to focus on student achievement through improved student-centered teaching and learning. This year in August, when we met, we outlined and the board approved that the 3 strategic objectives would be proficiency-based learning to continue that pathway pre-K to 12. The second objective is around improving teacher and administrator effectiveness. And lastly, we're working on creating a long-term district strategic plan. You have had one previously, but it was created in 2010, and we felt like it was time to look at this again. So you can see that we're increasing in enrollment in RSU 5. You kind of had gone through, back in 2010 it was the lowest, and then you were growing, and then you went back through a dip in 2015, and this current year we're at an all-time high of 1947, and we expect to reach a new high next year of about 1977. And this is enrollment by grade span, and you can see that we're staying pretty steady pre-K to 5, that the decrease for next year will be at the middle level, and the largest increase will be at our high school level, moving from currently we have 535 students to next year we're predicting that to be somewhere around 580. Our projected class sizes for next year are between 13 and 21 students. This year, when we were presenting the budget last year, our projected class sizes were 11 to 24, and that's pretty much where they've been. So I feel like our projections for next year, I feel pretty confident in. We met as an administrative team a few times, starting back, I think, in December, and we talked about what will move our needle forward the quickest, and we really came down to 3 areas that we feel like we have a real need to increase our math achievement. As we're talking about proficiency, we do not feel like that our kids are proficient enough in math, and we don't think it's okay for them not to reach that level. We also have a need, as I think somebody spoke to, in order to get kids to proficiency, you need more student support, and we recognize that. We're working on that, and that's the second area that you'll see in our budget. And lastly, in order to change instruction and to move the needle, even though this is budget neutral, we really need more time for our teachers and staff to collaborate. So I would say our first and foremost ask is for a half-time math strategist at the high school. So if we can't have anything else, I think this is the one that all the administrators recognize is most needed. And this is the number that one of the, I think it was it Jay that talked about, that I had spoken to him. Currently in the district, in 11th grade, we only have 38.7% of our students that are proficient. You can see that the state overall is also struggling in that area because the state average is 34.6%. But we just find that unacceptable, and we really want to see that number improve. And here is just further evidence of why we are so focused on math. This is the MEA from 3rd grade on. You can see that the math is kind of in that kind of orange-brown color, and that we really do pretty well at the elementary level. And then in 5th grade, you can see that the disparity starts growing from between the language arts and the math. And this is also just on another, we don't ever look at just one data point, so this is also on the NWEA, that you can see that our math scores are not as strong as our reading scores, and so we really want to improve that. And why do we want to improve it? I would argue that we do want all of our kids proficient in math, because we know that research tells us that kids who are strong in math and go on, that their earnings are higher, that they're more likely to enroll in college, and that when they're strong in math, they're also, which is equally as important, to persist and finish when they go on to college. Increased student support. Our kids could really benefit from more social work services at both Moore Street and Mass Landing. This would be for kids who do not have disabilities, because we do have social worker services available for those, but this would be for kids who may need those supports but are not identified with the disability. We also want to increase our ed tech support at Durham, Mass Landing, Freeport Middle School, and Moore Street. And there's quite a bit of research to also support that. Increased collaborative time. We're asking for one more early release day in the calendar for next year. That would provide time for our teachers to collaborate. And again, research supports that the more we can increase the skills of our teachers, that directly impacts student achievement. Where possible, we have really looked at the budget, and we've reallocated so that it's just not more ask without looking at other areas. So 3 of the primary areas that we have drawn from was, we have a half-time ed tech at Moore Street that we really feel like we can reallocate. We ended up at Durham. Bomar informed us last year that they would no longer provide transportation, and we were able to buy buses and hire bus drivers and still have a savings there. So we've reallocated that. I also added from the last presentation, just to remind people that when we adopted the budget last year, we had an interest payment for the track and field, and because we funded that without going through a bond, we have that savings in the budget. And then probably the primary area that we've realized the most savings is just by, as we built the budget this year, we looked at 3-year historical spending, and when we weren't needing the money, well, then we reduced those lines. And there are cases where we also increased the lines. And we do believe in multiple pathways for all kids, so that when they leave us, that they're ready for success. And so what does this mean? The current budget with all of the new numbers in there, it means that from last year we're asking for a 1.49% in expenditures, and that will result in a net impact for taxation of 3% currently. What are some of the main drivers of this expenditure increase? Last year we used a lot of the fund balance, and that's not really sustainable, so we're reducing the use of our fund balance from $961,000 down to $600,000. We would like to, over the next few years, get that reduced to about $250,000. We needed an additional van driver this year, a half-time, so that is in the current budget. Our high school is going through accreditation, and that visit will be next year at the cost of about $20,000, so that's in the budget. When we were looking at all of that historical spending, we did reduce a lot of lines, but one line that we had to increase was our subline for substitute teachers because of our historical spending, so that's an increase of $77,000. We've established a reserve account for the track and field, so 15 years from now when we're needing to redo that, at some level we'll have the funds there and it won't be a huge tax impact in that 1 year. We are always looking to improve our buildings, so we're wanting to increase that line by $50,000, which will result in us hitting $400,000, which has been a goal of the RSU since the formation in 2009. When we looked at class size and how many new kids we had this year at Mass Landing, we decided to put in an additional 5th grade teacher for next year. We have a finance software that we think will make us more efficient, so we have that at $30,000. The state redid how they're funding the regional schools, and so that created a reduction in expenditures of $500,000, which impacts that expenditure from year to year increase. We also have we added this year, because of the caseload, and EdTech to the Choices program out at Durham to the cost of $35,000, and also our strategic planning. We have a facilitator, and so there's a cost to that work. So here, just in a different format, you're seeing that 1.49% increase compared to previous years. And then here it is in just graph forms, just showing it in a different format. What are the two, back in January there were quite a few unknowns. We're now down to really only 2 unknowns, and that's around, we're in negotiations with both the educator contract and the support staff, so we still don't know what salaries and benefits will be for next year. I should say salaries. And then this is just our budget process timeline. So you can see we've made a lot of progress, and now tonight the board will deliberate. We will possibly adopt the budget at next week's board meeting, and then we'll have Q&A sessions in each of the towns through April and the beginning of May, and then we have our annual budget meeting on May 23rd with the referendum vote on June 12th. And I just want to close with a quote from Benjamin Franklin: "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest." And we appreciate your support to the budget. Last week, because of the new numbers, I also presented to the board an option 2, which would add a few more positions, which would include a .5 position out at Durham Community School that would help with literacy at the 5 to 8 level. We also were requesting a full-time ed tech at Freeport Middle School, similar to what you added last year for Durham. That would be more focused on checking in, checking out with students that are struggling behaviorally. And then we ask for a 1-day increase for an RTI position at Pownell Elementary under option 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so the way we have this set right now, so that was 6A, the review of the recommended budget. So now 7 on our agenda is public input. So this is comments from the folks in the crowd as it relates to the FY19 budget. There's green sheets that have the full budget, and then the shorter version that looks like this has got sort of the more high-level information over on by the door. So hopefully folks grab those on their way in, as well as the let there be light. As well as the option 1 and option 2. So option 1 is really the budget as it exists in those green sheets, and then option 2 is this pink one with those positions that Becky just mentioned. So we would be happy to hear commentary from folks around the budget.
I just have a couple of questions. If you need my name again, it's Pam Barry Santos. Pam Barry Santos. So I've got I guess it's the full budget here, the line items, and I just had some questions about what some of these are. So on page 5, there's something under professional services, an increase of $26,500 from last year under total curriculum development, and I was wondering what that is.
I'm going to guess that, and Michelle, you probably want to get out of your seat because I think you're going to answer those, right? Oh, Cynthia's going to answer this one? Okay.
I'll just come up Sam's side.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Of course.
So that was presented last week, and that is just shifting it from, because it's really a district service as opposed to individual school, it's not an additional increase. It really should have just been budget neutral. So that's just shifting it from Freeport Middle School and Durham Community School.
I guess I'm asking what it is, not where it came from.
Oh, okay, sorry. Well, I just wanted to clarify that's really not an increase. So we have support services and literacy for the middle school. And we have it in K-5 as well. But for the middle school, we contract with an outside consultant for Teachers College. And that's primarily what that funding is for.
Okay.
It may or may not be me, though.
On page 10, the same thing under system-wide technology, the purchase professional, and then also on that page, purchase professional under system-wide student assessment.
One of them is me. So we, I'll give you an example of student-wide student assessment. We use the NWEA, and so sometimes there's an increase per student.
Okay.
So that's that.
So that's what that is? Okay.
Yes.
And then...
I'm not technical.
Okay.
The $6,000 for technology is just for training for the tech staff, primarily.
Okay, so sending them off to training or bringing somebody in?
Both.
Okay. And then my last one. On page 30, system-wide superintendent's office, professional services again.
We get to hear from everybody.
So on this one, you're looking at the professional services line, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay, we are increasing here to purchase software, finance
Okay.
software.
Okay. Oh, so that's the finance software that was
That she was
mentioned?
talking about.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. All right, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a specific question, then just sort of a general commentary. And I'm looking at this screen sheet, the budget adjustments. Under superintendent, it says increased advertising based on historical spending. What kind of advertising does the superintendent's office do?
So what that is all advertising for open positions. So advertising in the
Oh.
newspaper.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. And so just kind of general, and it actually does kind of fold back into proficiency-based learning as I was interpreting it as it's been rolled out over the last several years. I see, you know, there's increased student support and opportunities for increased professional development and teacher collaboration, which I'm all for. But my general comment is, and then I guess you're opening up the strategic plan again and doing revisions to that. So I guess I'm just asking that as a district, and this is something I've been hoping for years, and I don't know, I just feel like we keep getting caught up in all different things, but in looking at a strategic plan and thinking about things like student support and professional development, and what the teachers do with their collaboration time and professional development, that we start to think more holistically and more project-based and kind of have a vision for learning that is more experiential and hands-on. I think, you know, you can bring strategists in to kind of put Band-Aids on and help teachers kind of keep up to date with the latest and the greatest. But I think if we give teachers the time and opportunity to use their cohorts and all the experience that some of them have, and just sort of rethink the way we teach. We've got this big, beautiful building now, and part of the promise of that, with, you know, even the architects were like, you have these spaces that can be used so differently than what most people think of, you know, traditionally as school. So I guess I'm just generally asking that that we put our resources to use to sort of come back locally and be more visionary about how we're teaching kids. And, you know, you think of workforce-ready children, it's all about creativity and innovation, and that starts in, you know, when they're 3 and 4 years old, and the kind of experiences we give our little tiny people are the exact same experiences that, you know, our elementary, our middle school, and our high schoolers, and we as adults love, is that, you know, a project-based learning, which I always thought that was the big promise with proficiency-based, because the wording of some of the standards implies that we're really, really going to have the kids working independently and doing, you know, expositions of their work and pushing them into their, you know, out of their comfort zone and experiencing, you know, making a liberal arts, you know, student dig a little deeper into math and see how it's applied, and bring the community in and get the kids out into the community. And I think that might eliminate some of the needs for these strategists and interventionists, because the kids will really, really be immersed in their learning, and their teachers will be enthusiastic about rethinking how they teach what they teach and do more collaboration and interdisciplinary teaching. Thanks.
Thanks, Kristen. Any other comments on the budget? Okay. Thank you. I did just want to point out to folks, I know Becky put it up on the screen there about our schedule, and it had that, one of the things I noticed was that April 11th date is at Pownell. So if folks, and we'll make sure when we post our agendas for those meetings, they generally say at the top, but just wanted to let people know it's at the Pownell Elementary School, because in those 3 meetings, we move them from town to town, Durham, Pownell, and then back here to Freeport. So just wanted to point that out for folks. Okay, so now we are on to 8, unfinished business. Consideration and approval for the 2018-2019 school calendar second read. So in your packets is the calendar again.
Good evening. So last time when we talked about calendar, there was a request or a couple of choices given, some options. So I did take those 2 options. I'll remind you of what those were. I took those 2 options back to the administrative team, and it was pretty unanimous. So I think, Vali, you had suggested option 1 was, now it's not on you don't have the one before, but I'm just going to try to refresh you. The calendar is the same as it was, except for, the 2 options were to move, we had a December 5th day that was originally an early release. And so you asked if we would look at moving that December early release to February 15th. So you can see on your calendar that is now an early release. And then with that, moving that February 15.5 PLD to December 7th. So that is since that's the one that's on your calendar in front of you, that's the one we chose. There was another option in May, so I don't know if you need me to tell you what that was, because this is the one we landed on. So it was one of the 2 choices that you provided. Then we shared it with the CEA, and they were fine with this proposed calendar as it is, but they offered another change that I thought I would bring to you. The B team was fine with it as well, and that was to look at the December 7th PLD. If you see that December 7th, it's the 0.5 PLD day, and if you look at March 8th, that's the full PLD day. So she suggested that maybe we flip-flop those 2 in the event that we have another weather day like the last 2 years, and we've turned it into a student day so that the teachers wouldn't lose a full PLD. So I thought that was an option that sounded reasonable, and the B team thought it sounded reasonable. So I'm putting that to you today, maybe to an option to amend it with that change.
Was the other early release, was it always in May?
Yes. The one so I didn't change anything in May from the last draft.
Okay.
Yes.
Comments? Vali?
I'd be in favor of that amendment. It makes total sense considering the number of snow days that we've had in the last couple of years. I'm ready to adopt this calendar, keeping in mind that in the future, the preference for me continues to be to try to reduce the number of early release days, professional learning days that happen during the winter months, with the caveat fully understanding that we need to have PLD on a consistent basis. But if there are any other ways that people can think outside of the box to continue the PLD without eating into instructional days during the winter, that would be preferable.
So was that a motion to approve the calendar as amended with flipping?
I make a motion to approve the calendar as amended, with flip-flopping the half PD and the full PD.
And the second from Naomi. So do we have comments? So typically what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to have the motion on the floor, and then you have a conversation about it. So I'm going to go to you, Maddie, because I'm guessing you have.
I have a comment. I noticed that there's no change to the wording of the national holiday in October. I'd like to have some discussion on whether we might consider changing that either to national holiday or Indigenous Peoples Day.
Did you guys talk about that, Cynthia, at all?
We did not.
Okay. So I suppose that's something we could do as a board, right? I think we were going to try and get some clarity around whether we just do that on our own. Did we?
Well, I've got some information, but I had no idea when we were going to be bringing it to a vote, so I don't have it presentable yet.
I mean, I guess probably without any sort of further info to provide people to make a decision one way or the other, how do we feel about making it national holiday? And then it is what it is.
I would be fine with that. Personally, I would prefer that we not call it Columbus Day because I do know it is offensive to a number of people. I'd love to see us at some point move to Indigenous Peoples Day, as many people are doing, but I think it's a nice interim step.
Agreed.
Are you making a motion to amend?
Yes, I'm making a motion to amend it, calling it national holiday.
Okay, I'll second that.
So how this process works is we are voting on the amendment, which is just the naming to national holiday. And then if that passes, then Valley's motion becomes permanently amended to include that, and then we vote on that. Okay? Is that correct? Is Robert's rules?
As far as I understand.
Okay, good. Okay, so any other discussion on that piece of it, on the amendment from Maddie? Jen?
I'm just wondering, maybe what kind of feedback you've gotten, or what kind of, I haven't heard much about this other than just being at these meetings. So I'm just wondering if you have more information from the community or other parents, or if it's just
nothing that I have would be it would be anecdotal and conversational in nature. The conversations that I've had have indicated support for the idea, but I don't have anything beyond just some private conversations. Okay. I know Ben was potentially going to speak with some students. I don't think the students have had some time, but if you have anything, what you think might be student perspective, I'd be happy to hear that.
Because of the lovely amount of snow days that we've had recently, I haven't had time to put together. Right, honestly, I haven't had enough time to put together something formal and send it out or read something over the announcements. But I have been hearing some conversations around, at least some people in my grade and in some different classes, that are in favor of switching, because students are aware of the meaning behind this movement and change. So I think it would be beneficial to change. And some students do too.
Okay, so I think that feedback will be, I like this idea as the interim step, and then we can gather some more info. Love to hear the student perspective on it. And then when we're doing our calendar 12 months from now, we can either decide to make that step or not. All right, so we are voting on the amendment, which is to change it to national holiday for October 8th on the calendar. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes or no, Candy?
Can you do
no
it?
No waving.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Opposed?
That adds up to 11. That's great.
Okay, so that motion carries. So now Valley's motion is amended as by Maddie. Do we have any other discussion on the calendar as presented by Cynthia with those adjustments? No? Okay. All those in favor?
Thank you.
None opposed. Thank you. And thank you to you, Cynthia, and to the B team for being flexible and
great, thank you.
And hearing us. So thank you for that. Okay. So now we are on to the new B, which Becky has for us. Okay, thank you.
So there doesn't seem to be a lot of desire to go into June 25th, which is the Monday. So we discussed this at the B team, a couple of different proposals, but where we came down to was that we want to add an hour to 5 different days because the state has weighed in that if you make up 5 hours, that can count as a student day. So what we're recommending is April 2nd through the 6th, which will be before April vacation. It's before we get heavy into the spring sports, that we would just add an hour to each of the days that week, Monday through Friday.
The beginning or the end?
Oh, at the end of the day. I think that would be really early for our teenagers to be getting out of bed.
Okay.
So, Becky, would you mind sharing what other alternatives were considered?
There was an alternative of making the last day a full day, and that would gain us 3 hours, and then tacking an hour on 2 other days. We also, I guess our second option, if the board doesn't like the first option that I just presented, would be to do the week of April 9th through the 12th, and then also on the 23rd. So the one thing that we talked about April 2nd through 6th is if you approve that, we've just got to get really fast and furious on the communication tomorrow, right, and start getting it out there. And so the week of April the 9th buys us another week to communicate it, but it also means, because no one's in school on the 13th, that we're going to, come back on April the 23rd, which is the Monday, and still have a long day right after vacation. So that's why I think the administrative team preferred the first option. They didn't. So any of the options were preferable over going into Monday. So we'll put that out there first. I think the going a full day on the last day, that is just, they feel like that's going to be a long day on the last day. I think they've become used to doing the half day.
Was there discussion, particularly with Jen and Charlie, about the high school kids who have jobs after school?
Well, we know that for all of our kids and staff, we're going to have to be extremely flexible, right? So we realize that those will have to be excused absences or something like that if they have to leave.
Okay. Maddie?
Is April 13th a professional learning day? Or is there a reason why that's not an option?
That is an option. It's a professional comp day, so teachers do not have to be here because of the conferences that they've held throughout the year. And so I could tell you that we already have the part of the baseball team flying down to, I think, Florida or Carolina or someplace. That's not in Maine. That's not in Maine. And so we have both teachers and students that are gone for that. There are a lot, because of the way it's been on the calendar, there are a lot of staff who've already booked, plane tickets to someplace warmer. And so we just felt like it would be a little bit of a nightmare with the substitute teachers.
So was adding 1 hour to individual days the only viable option? Did anyone bring up Saturday? Or, I'm not endorsing any of these things. I'm just asking questions. And I also wanted to ask, what would we do, say, if we had another snow day? Then we've added 1 hour slots to existing school days, but then may we end up with the Monday anyhow if we need to add another snow day?
Right, anything's possible. And so we would, brainstorm around that, or we would decide, if something happens in May, we're probably just going to have to go on the Monday, right? We're just kind of trying to take it one day at a time.
I wish Ginny was here. I'm sure she knows the date of the very last snow day we've ever had.
Right. Yeah.
My concern would be that nobody shows up on that Monday. I highly doubt I'm going to be sending my kid to school on that Monday. I got to be honest.
4 hours.
Well, right.
Yeah.
And I think that's our concern, right? That's going to be, and I To me, no one should be booking, none of my staff should be booking any vacation in June. But they don't all share that opinion. And so I have staff, and I know there are camps that are starting on that Monday. And so that's why we're looking at some alternative. But you're right, we still may have another day.
Glad to see today into tomorrow isn't looking nearly as bad.
No.
Jen.
Sarah, because you have young kids, you don't send them on Monday, but what's for high school kids in terms of if they have finals, would the last final be on the Monday if we did go to the Monday?
So I think currently, Charlie, isn't the last day usually a makeup day anyway?
So do we need to act now and add these hours so rapidly? I mean, couldn't we wait and add in May if we need to, and then in the meantime we see if the weather cooperates and we can just go with this option of adding 1 hour to 5 days?
I think the problem, though, is once you get into May, you have all the sports right after school, and that hour becomes really disruptive. I think in beginning of April, maybe track, and probably not even track has started. So I think
They start on March 26th.
Okay, so, but that's practice, right? It's not meets. So I think that's probably the least disruptive, other than jobs potentially, but for the sports scheduling. And I don't see Craig here, but I'm sure he would be troubled.
Yeah, I think he talked about it at our A team. Throw out the word that he used. It's not like the real game, but it's kind of a pretend game. But what's the real word? So, yeah, but he used a different word.
I'm like, you didn't know the word scrimmage.
No, I knew scrimmage.
It's an exhibition.
Thank you. That's it. It's an exhibition. That's the word I couldn't think of. Thank you. Will. You like the pretend game?
The pretend game.
So
Yes,
I think there may be a couple of those, but I don't think it was a huge impact. So that's why we chose that. So even if we had another day, I think we'd still be recommending this to get rid of one day, right? Because then we'd be into Tuesday.
Yeah, but we are going from a full instructional day to 5 1-hour slots and then a half day at the end. And so we are losing instructional time every time we make these unorthodox arrangements.
Yes, because we...
Right, because
yes.
the last day would still be a half day on
So-
Friday now.
Okay, so I'll
And now we've
push...
shortened a full day to 5 1-hour slots.
So, I'll push back a little bit on that because our student day currently is 6.5 hours, and probably an hour of that is recess and lunch, right? So by adding an hour, the 5 hours really will be making up the majority of that instructional time.
So my personal preference would be to petition the state to get that power day back, and then we wouldn't have to make up that one day we didn't have. But if we don't do that and we do go with adding an hour, I mean, it has to be unexcused absence because
absolutely.
not even music lesson. I mean,
Right.
there's so much stuff that
it's scheduled.
it can't be questioned if
I agree.
they need to leave.
Sarah,
I'm curious if we've done this before and what a school day actually looks like. I'm sure everybody is, capable of figuring that out. But I'm just curious, like you tack an hour onto the day, what are you doing for that hour?
do you just add a teach period?
I would think, I'm looking at Charlie, but I would think they would just add so many minutes to each period. So I don't think there would be anything significant there, but I guess I would ask one of the elementary principals to talk about like where their mind has gone around something like that, because I think that I think it's easier at the probably the middle and the high school level where you're just going to make a little bit longer period, and I don't think that's going to be right. But who's brave enough to share their thinking?
First thing I want to ask her is, did she kiss the animal?
I did kiss a pig.
Oh, it was a pig. Not even a wow.
And could you explain? Wasn't it related to reading?
Yeah, so March is a big reading month in our building, and to
Yes.
generate excitement, it was
It's not a bribe as much as building excitement for reading in our building. So there is a video out there somewhere. So I floated this idea to a team in PLC today, and they were like hungry for the extra hour. So the ideas that came around, teachers said, oh, I can't wait to do more complex work with interactive read aloud. We could do an engineering unit and have students build simple machines as follow-up to what we just did on gravity and force. I mean, there is no shortage of ideas that folks would love to run with, and they were really thinking about doing it a week-long project where kids would have an hour each day to do something more hands-on. That's an extension of what they've been doing in their units.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so are you looking for a motion?
Yes, I am, so that we can communicate quickly, right?
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to extend the week of April 6th through... Second through 6th. And extend the instructional day for 1 hour.
Each day?
Each day.
And there's a second from Jeremy. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? So you got that, Cynthia?
9 to 2.
Yep. All right, so that carries. Anybody volunteer to tell the kids? I'm not telling my kids. They'll just get out when they get out. They'll just figure it out when the bell doesn't ring.
They'll be happy on.
That's true. They will be very happy they don't have to come back on Monday, particularly for the camps. Okay. So now we are on to 8C, previously B, board deliberations on the FY19 budget. So this is not something that requires a vote. This is the discussion around. This is the discussion around the vote of the budget, with the hope that we are at a point where we can adopt the budget next week. Okay. So, I guess I will open it up for comments, questions, ideas, thoughts.
Just
Jeremy.
Kind of a general question. Where does the state subsidy get reflected in all this? Because I think we do have a more concrete number.
Yes, so it is in here on page 10. I'm looking at Michelle because, okay.
Of what document?
It's on page 10 of the shorter version here that's not landscape, the portrait one. And if you see, so the operating budget, it's at the top. We have the non-shared debt for Durham and Freeport, and then local revenues. So the shared revenues are the numbers down there in the bottom right, and then state aid is the, that's the subsidy. So $4,659,591. What?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, this one, right here. Second to last page, actually. Yeah, right there. Valley.
So I would like to thank the administrative team for coming up with 2 different options. I think given the newly found state aid that amounts to about $600,000, it's nice to have that second option. Having said that, because of the amount that we are receiving that is unexpected and that wasn't factored in when the initial budget was proposed, I would like to make a motion to request that the administrative team come back to the board with an option 3 that may include additional priorities in the order that they so choose.
Second from Maddie. Do you have, can you provide them with some, like, is there a number you want them to reach? Is there?
You mean for the tax increase or for the
Right.
budget increase?
Both, either?
I don't have any specific numbers in mind because I do not want to direct the priorities based on a number that is arbitrary. But I would like for them to consider when they look at their green sheet, what it is that they can add, that probably would go to up to 5%, but that not being the number. I mean, I don't think anyone would have an appetite to go above 5, but I do think that there are a lot of things that we're leaving on the table that we could easily accommodate this year while staying well below 5, including a lot of things that maybe one-time expenditures, which would be a safe thing to add to the budget this year, even though the increase in the CTE funding will be sustained over the years. It's a one-time reduction, but basically it's stable funding from this year on out unless another change gets done to the funding formula, which could happen. But that would be what I have in mind.
Okay. She's just, we don't have to vote on it. She's requesting that the administration come up with a third option, right? Which would require a vote of the board to see if the whole, or the majority of the board felt similarly.
There is a motion on the table,
Right.
so it will require a vote.
Right, yes. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to vote on it, right. I guess my thought is on the CTE piece, we also had our revenue reduced correspondingly by the 500,000. So, they both went down together. When we look at the expenditure line, school finance is sort of a funny thing in that you look at things very compartmentalized. You look at your revenue from taxation and subsidy in one bucket, and then you look at your expenses in another. My day job in banking, we look at the bottom line, right? So while our expenses went, increased 1.49 because of that $500,000 drop, right? So we met the needs that our administrators came to us and said they needed, and this was the result. We don't necessarily look at that net income number, which they would have gone down together. So I just want to point that out, that I feel like for me, I'd rather have them do their budget on what they feel like they need, and not because it came in at a certain number, say, well, we need to do more, right? We've asked them what they need, they've told us what they need, and this is the resulting budget as it relates to that. I feel like we can potentially undermine our credibility in future years if we sort of add things because we can and feel like, we look at the chart, which is no longer behind me despite me pointing at it, and when we have years where we have a 7.7% need because we felt like that's what we need to serve our kids, I feel like we're in a much better position to make that ask when we can point to years where, but look, we were frugal when we could be, right? I mean, we're servicing the needs. We're not just maintaining status quo. We're adding things. We're adding supports. We're adding strategists based on what they've told us they need, and we're still able to do it in a efficient way. I feel like I'm happy with what they've presented to us.
When the budget was first proposed in January, though, we were presented with first priority, second tier, and third tier. So
not really. That's
not what this is?
That's what this sheet is. Well, they were done based on a brainstorming session where some of them got 0 votes. So even people were like, well, have we thought about doing this? And but I don't think we eliminated things because of where they fell in the tiers. I think it was they decided they didn't need those things, not because of the cost of doing those things. It was, what do we need to move ourselves forward? I could be wrong. That was my understanding.
My only point is that there was a process by which the priorities were reached, and there were a second tier of lesser priorities and a third tier of even lesser priorities. So it doesn't seem to me that it would be an undue hardship for the team to get back together and relook at those and say, is there anything, if we wanted to take advantage of this opportunity, is there an opportunity to re-ask for those things? I'd like us to have a chance to look at that.
And I would like to point out that when the budget was presented, the financial situation was different. Having said that, when the administrators came to present, I specifically asked about all these things on the green sheet, and every single response was very eloquent and very convincing as something that would move the needle for student achievement. So as much as we can't always fund everything, there are very good reasons why all of these things were part of the discussion when the administrative team first got together to draft the initial budget. And so I do share Maddie's opinion that what we got in the first priority list may have very well been a result of a financial situation that is different from our current situation, and that administrators made very conscious decisions to not ask for anything or to categorize in first, second, and third priority, knowing full well that there's a limit to how much they can ask. But then given the opportunity now to say, what else do you think would move the needle forward? And just a couple of items. I'm not saying just include everything, because that would be completely irresponsible. But that they would have very good reason and very convincing arguments, again, to come back to us with a third option that we may consider and we may adopt or not as we see fit. But it would just give the board another opportunity to have a third look with a fresh set of eyes, given the new current reality of our financial situation.
Can I ask Becky if when the discussion about prioritization happened, was it under the guise of a specific, like, did you have budget numbers in front of you that said, if we do these things, this is what it means? Or was it more high level than that?
I would say it was a combination of when we did this list initially, we really, it was a brainstorm, right? So, I mean, it wasn't just way out there, because every administrator knew that if they threw an idea up there, that I was charting it on a piece of paper, and then we were going to have discussions about it. So this is the list that resulted, and we then went through, I think at the first meeting we ended up, I gave them so many votes. And so it was discussed, there were questions asked about all kinds of things, there were opinions, and then people voted. And what you have in the third tier are ideas that were initially just thrown out as a part of a brainstorm, and in the end, even the person who thought of it didn't end up voting for it. Okay? And so then what you ended up with was the first priority. We all kind of agreed that that's what we kind of wanted in there. And then the second tier is just, you know, those all received some sort of vote. They're not necessarily in the order of the vote currently. So I'm going to use the example of the behavior specialist. So I think that it initially received enough votes that it was in the first priority. But then as we came back and really at another meeting after everybody had time to really think about it, we talked about it again. And that was a position that, would we like to have that possibly sometime in the future? Yes, we would, probably. But we haven't thought it out enough to feel like we'd be fiscally responsible to the taxpayers, because how would we use that person? Are we ready for that? We've really started to focus this year on what we call RTIB, and we just determined we're not really ready for it. But you see it there on the second tier, because that's the way I ended up grouping them. If they got a vote, they're in the second tier. They might have only had one vote. They might have had the majority of the vote. And so when we saw that, when the numbers started coming in, I pulled the group back together and said, okay, if we had an opportunity to increase the budget a little bit more, let's talk about the positions that we think would really move the needle. And that's when we came up with the three things that are in that second tier. We really felt like we're ready for those positions and that it really could help it. Some of the other things on there, we really just haven't, I don't think we're ready for them. But it doesn't mean if you tell me that I have, more money, the team is not going to have trouble coming up with needs. Or, okay, will that move the needle a little bit more? Could we put something there? Yeah, we can do that. But, our vision talks about being fiscally responsible to our taxpayers, right? And we feel like either one of these options, we're moving the needle and we're also being fiscally responsible. But there are always ways to spend whatever money that we receive, and we're happy if directed to go back. You've got a wonderful group of administrators. They're all good thinkers. They're strategic thinkers. And if we're told, you have $200,000 more, we'll put it to good use.
And I just want to clarify one thing. The reason why I'm not comfortable saying a number is precisely because I can recognize from the list exactly which are the items that would move the needle considerably. So my request would be for the team to keep that mindset if they are directed to produce a third option, to include the items that would actually move the needle considerably. So it would be charged to be responsible with taxpayer money. It wouldn't be just a free-for-all, just go and add anything you want. I mean, it would have to be justified, and everything has been justified to me already on the tier 2. But obviously, there are some that pop out more than others.
So I will say, I feel like that's what your second option is, where we have been very, very strategic, and this is what'll move the needle. I'm just going to give you a brief synopsis. I'll try to be very brief. The curriculum increase of $15,000, that was initially put on there because we never know what our title funding is. But has it been decreased significantly? It hasn't. But could it be? It could be. So that was the discussion around that one. The storage shed. Now, Craig's not here to defend that. Would Craig love a storage shed? Craig would love one. David would love another one for the music department and the theater. So, is that going to move the needle on student achievement? No. But it's a wonderful, at some point, do we need that? I also want to just mention to you that, we have the building project. We're getting near the end of it. There are some funds that we're going to have that we're going to have to decide how to expend that. So there's possibilities there. The increase for van hours for summer learning, we're not there yet. We don't have the summer learning figured out. If you said to us, we're giving you those van hours, can my team, they'll all work as hard as you ask them. They are very dedicated administrators. At some point, do we feel like we need to create a summer program? And what do we know about summer programming is that transportation is the biggest barrier. So when we really get a robust summer program going, we may be back to ask for that. And if we get it this year, maybe we'll do something around that. Increase adult ed staff, PD, that was an ask by David to, just provide more PD for the installation of sound systems. Those are the mics that the teachers wear around their necks so that it's easier for kids to hear them. We have a plan for that. It would just finish that project off sooner. The data support position, we really have not thought that out. It was a request by one of the administrators. I think that's too soon for that. I don't think there was widespread support for that. The music teacher, that was put out there because there is some, I think, inequity in music lessons, right? I don't know that we have that totally figured out, if we got that, what that really would mean for the schedule, but I think Will is happy to talk to that if you want to know more about that. And I just spoke to the behavioral specialist that the team really does not feel like we're ready for that. And then the third tier received no vote, so I think that speaks for itself. But again, you know, we can go back and brainstorm, and there might be something that's not even on one of these tiers that would pop up when we're really talking about it.
I guess I'd like to take the opportunity to say a couple things. One, I'd like to thank you, Becky, and all the administrators. It just seems like you went through a very purposeful process to talk about priorities and whatnot, and I don't think that's always been done in years past. So I really, really appreciate that process to look at what's really, really necessary and what were highest priorities. I think the other thing is that it's just, I think in terms of the board and the system presenting a budget to the towns, to look at presenting a 1.49 or 1.79 budget increase, what do I want to say, looks like to the townspeople and the taxpayers that we're really being concerned about that. Obviously, in addition to what's best for kids, that's the highest priority. That's a hard balancing act all the time, and it just seems like we've really looked at that. And I would say that, from my perspective, I would like to respect the option 1 and 2 that the administrators have given us to look at for our discussion, and to think about taking advantage of this opportunity, not to put a 4 or 5% kind of increase out there. I think that it takes into account what administrators have said moves the needle for the kids and still is respectful to the taxpayers.
Yeah, definitely echo what Candy said. I think an amazing amount of work was done to create this option 2. The only one that I've got a question on is just in terms of cost of the sound system. Like generally, I don't know if it's for Dennis, but how far away are we? So, Seth, sorry. How far away are we from reaching that where we want to get with those systems? And would that be that sounded like the only one that had support maybe for doing that sooner?
What we have in the budget now in option 1 and 2 would finish sound systems in K5 next year, and then we'd finish the middle school the following year.
So how many, say per classroom, how much does it cost?
It depends if we have to replace the projector and the sound system. Mm-hmm. If it's just the sound system, it's like, I want to say $1,400. If the projector's included, it's about $2,500 a classroom, maybe a little bit more.
So this is basically Freeport Middle School that we're talking about, the difference?
Next year would be Freeport Middle School, which we've already started there. We'd finish the following budget year.
Is it already at Durham?
Yes.
Because it was part of the building project? Yeah, okay.
Lindsay.
Can you just clarify, why does the classroom need a sound system? What's going on there? I'm sorry, I should know that. I should know.
I mean, everybody, it doesn't matter where you are in the classroom, everybody's going to have the same experience hearing.
They have these little
students.
microphones that sit right here, and I think it also helps the teachers not have to
lose their voice.
Yeah, because they're talking all day.
Okay.
Right.
Jen.
Just to go along with what Jeremy and what Candy said, I agree. I feel really confident in the 2 options. I think a lot of thought went into them. And what keeps coming to my mind with, talking about having excess money or extra money. Not to put my parent hat on, but one of the things that I have always taught my children is that just because you have money does not mean you need to spend it. And I think that that's kind of a good gauge on this. Like things seem really healthy, they seem really good, and I think that we should appreciate that and keep things at the option 1 and 2. Yeah, and I'm loud.
I can hear you just fine, but I know I get messages from JD the next day when somebody talks without their mic. I couldn't tell. Better.
I'd love to hear more about the .5 music teacher in Durham, and you mentioned possible inequities.
So Will's on the spot. So,
loves to
because
speak to anything.
I think I gave you all of my knowledge, and so I have no more to impart.
And starting with, is there a .5 teacher there already? I'd just like to know,
Sure. So what it is, and I would say to you that this is not a well-developed plan at this point, because part of, as you heard Becky say, the process was really sort of like brainstorming sort of direction, and then depending on where that then ends up is how much time then gets invested into pushing that forward into the following year. So this is definitely not a well-developed plan at this point. The issue is that for our school across pre-K-8, we have 1.2 music teachers. So we have a music teacher who is at the school, and then we also share a colleague who is the music teacher at Pownell, who joins us at the end of the day. The factor is that because we have middle school students, we also have a school band and school chorus, and the ability for the music teacher to provide general music classes throughout the day limits the opportunity to actually then give sectionals or more specific instrument-based lessons to children who are in the band. So it really is around building upon, we've been fortunate over the last couple of years to build the band and chorus. It's not at the same level as some of the high performances that occur in our fellow schools in the RSU. And as we've built the band and chorus, they've sort of doubled in size, but even that is relatively small by comparison. What we bumped into is this capacity to then provide lessons within the day. So that's really where that position would go. It would be around supporting that opportunity to build the band through lessons and instrumental things. That makes sense? All right. Oh.
I'm sorry, I might have missed part of what you said. Because to my knowledge, there's only one music teacher at some of the other schools.
Yeah.
Like Mass Landing has a music teacher.
They don't have.
But they have pre-K through
They have a
8.
band.
We're K-8.
Oh.
Pre-K-8, right? Because even the pre-K.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, I was a little slow on that.
It is very different across all the schools. I mean, there are just certain pieces that we have that are unique to each of our schools.
Okay.
You want to wait till he sits down for a question? I'm just teasing. Go ahead. Okay. Any further discussion on the... Allie.
I would just like to clarify, I'm not taking offense or anything like that, but I just want to make sure that I don't come across as an attitude of because we have the money, we have to spend it. I'm not looking at it like that at all. What I'm looking at here are several maybe one-time expenditures that if we don't do them this year, we will have to do them next year or the year after. And we may not be in the same position that we're this year, next year, and the year after. And we may see that next year we have to fund some of these items at the cost of a much higher tax increase. So I'm just trying to spread the pain around and saying this year we are lucky that we can actually include some of these things without hurting anyone seriously. Whereas if we wait, we may have to do it under pressure on a year when we don't have any additional state aid, and then it will really hurt. So it's just a question of looking just long-term what it is that we can spread around so that we have stable funding and stable expenditures over the years.
I also appreciate you going through the Tier 2 list and explaining it a bit more, and I can see that some of those don't sound like huge priorities. However, the music teacher, maybe there's not a real plan in place, but it sounds like a no-brainer to me. And we have an amazing arts department at the high school, and I think that students from Durham should have the same preparation for high school that they're getting at the middle school now.
I share Maddie's thought. When I think about that, one teacher K through 8 for DCS. I mean,
1.2. There's 1.2 right now.
1.2. Sorry, I was like spacing out when he was talking, and that's terrible.
He takes it all very personally.
I was just like processing a lot, and sometimes I'm like, wait a minute, I missed what he said.
So for those of you at home who didn't hear him, he said that's very common feedback. You're welcome.
Okay, so 1.2 for K through 8. I mean, I'm just looking at, like, we have a full-time music teacher for K through 3 at Mass Landing. We have a full-time music teacher, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know the ins and outs of the points, 0.5 or whatever, but full-time music teacher at MLS. Do we have a full-time music teacher at Pownell?
No, because that's who we're sharing.
That's who we're sharing.
That's where the 0.2 comes from. So they're 0.8 in Pownell, and then the other 0.2 in Durham.
And Pownell is K through 5.
I don't. Okay, Mike.
I think that the music teacher, she might be 0.8, but she's not at 0.8 music. She's also an ed tech.
Oh.
They have a band for the K5?
Yeah.
Fourth and fifth.
I would like the staffing hours to be equitable across the district.
I think it's hard because, like Will said, there's such a range of opportunities and like age ranges, and I'm not sure what equitable means, like hours per student, or
well, if they don't have sectionals and they don't have like instruction for their particular section, I mean,
I think honestly, they do, right? But maybe it's not sufficient. Listening to my
Could you
kids
go
play trumpet,
to the mic?
maybe it's not sufficient. He doesn't watch us. It's fine.
Ask him to go to the mic.
He's coming.
Right, it's like they.
Lindsay, I'm on my way, so just prep up.
Okay, I'll get my attention ready for you. You have my full attention, sir.
I've talked right to you. And now I don't even remember the question, Michelle, sorry.
There is lessons for everyone in the band.
Advanced band does not get lessons currently. So
they don't, so it's just
not
beginner
always 7th and 8th grade, but generally the older children have that. There's some children who have lessons outside of school, so the beginning band have lessons.
Did that just change?
This year is where we've gotten to this point because of the numbers.
Okay.
And that's what I'm saying.
I dropped my kid off at 8 o'clock in the morning for something.
Yeah. So there's stuff that does happen before school, and then there's also things that happen early in school. But that's the sort of limitation we've hit, is that as we asked, we sort of charged our new teacher a few years ago with building this program, and the sort of feedback is we've kind of built it as far as we can with the time that is available, and to take it to that next level, we're going to, and the compromise to this, and when I'm saying to you it's not been planned through, is that time has to come from somewhere in the day. So that's the other factor that we have to then consider, is that if a child is going to be now having this opportunity for these lessons, what other piece of that is that coming from? So, but I'm happy to look at this in a lot more detail and then come back with more of a concrete proposal.
You got your finger on the mic, John?
Well, yes. I obviously, you've already gone back and looked at it. I've heard a couple of really good ideas that I hadn't thought about. We find ourselves in a very enviable position where we have a budget that, I applaud you for the work that you've done to keep it at that number. But we have a chance, perhaps, to have them look at it. It's not going to cause any harm. If they come back and say, we're really happy and none of these things, we can function very nicely without them, that's great. But what harm is it going to have them look at it and see if there is indeed a third option or something you'd like to add to the second option?
Amend the second option. Sarah.
This may not be feasible for this programming year, but I'm often hearing of the inequities between schools in sort of a piecemeal fashion. Is there any way to get sort of a list of what each school is offering? And I think our goal should be eventually to have all this, because it's opportunities. When you get right back, down to it, it's who's getting the opportunities and who isn't. So it should be our goal to have that be equitable across the board. So I'd love to just see where we are. Have some sort of list, yeah.
Maybe that's something in the strategic plan. Jeremy, you saying no?
So definitely, I think when we're looking at priorities, and I know this year we did look at some support across the district that the administrators, that has been a lot of part of our discussion. And I have to say that I'm very impressed with our administrators to be able to not just advocate for their own building, but when they hear from the other administrators, like, such and such is a need, that they're advocating for each other, right? So I think we do that. I think what you're asking would take a little bit of time, and it would take a whole lot of, we probably would need to do that in a workshop format, because I think you're hearing that sometimes it looks like we have a full-time person somewhere, but really they're not. They're point this, and then they do point that of an ed tech. And then we have very unique structures across our schools, which is great, but that creates different needs. But we're happy to do it to the best of our ability if you'd like that in a workshop format at some point next year.
Yeah, and I don't think it needs to be all that cumbersome. I think it really could be, these are the different disciplines or whatever. How are we staffing those disciplines? What school is offering what programming? What's missing? I think it can be as basic as that, and then just sitting down and comparing apples to apples. Or apples to oranges in some cases. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to request the administration to come back with an option 3 of their own making, and for next week.
And did I hear at some level around 5%? Is that what you said, Valley?
I didn't mean to say any numbers. I only responded to a question about numbers, but my preference is not to attach any numbers to this motion, just to give the administrators full discretion on what they consider to be a priority to move the needle for the district.
So it could be that it comes back as option B.
Right.
Can I?
Yes.
I just want some process clarification. So since we're scheduled to vote on this next week, correct?
Which we still can, yeah.
So would that come, in advance of the meeting? With our paperwork, we'd review it, and then we would discuss it, and then as
dilemma.
part of our vote? Or?
Tomorrow is when I was going to say, tomorrow is when the packages go out.
Which packages are those?
For next
the board
week.
packet.
Oh, because next week's already next week.
Yeah.
But could you, sometimes we do get reports that trickle in after the board packet goes out. So, it could come to us on Monday or Tuesday, but before the meeting would be really helpful.
Okay, so what's going to be difficult about that, I have to pull my team together. So that is a team of 18 calendars. Now, we can make it happen because I can just say, you're clearing your calendar, right?
I'm sure they love that.
Right, but, I can't promise when you're going to get that. More than likely we would be meeting on Monday and Tuesday and pulling something together. So I think it could be that we're just going to, I don't know how much flexibility we have around the vote. Michelle, I'm looking at you. What's the latest we can be
Because
voting
we're not
on this?
signing warrants next week, right? So if we vote next week, we sign warrants the following week?
That's in 2 weeks.
The
because we
11th,
don't-
right? 'Cause
The 11th,
We
correct.
actually have a Wednesday off in there.
Yes, we do. We could potentially, I worry about, because that, we have one April 11th, and then we don't have one for 2 more weeks. So now we're really, really pushing it to sign the warrants and get them out there. Because remember, we have to post them. There's the days that they need to be posted and advertised, and we do not want to miss that at all.
Why? What happens then?
Yeah.
We don't go in there.
So I do worry. I know last year we pushed it. We really literally pushed it to the last possible day.
I was going to say that's not uncommon. We try. I mean, we set it with the expectation, like, ideally, this is when we would execute, right, and vote on the budget. But if we needed to move it, I mean, I think as a board, we've added meetings to be able to vote to make sure that we get the warrant signed on time. I mean, obviously, that is the number one priority.
Number one priority.
So I guess...
so it's not out of the realm of possibilities.
Okay, so I guess what I would like from you for next week is, what does the timeline look like? What day is the very last day? And then, we won't try not to do that to you, but it helps us, inform our decision-making.
I can do that.
That'd be great.
But for the purpose of this discussion, if the administrative teams is able to gather on Monday or Tuesday, even if you float something Wednesday a few hours before the meeting, I mean, just whatever advance notice would be appreciated. And if it has to be at the meeting, well, it has to be at
Or
the meeting.
maybe we just do it at the meeting. I mean, if it's going to be a list like this, we're going to talk about it anyway.
Correct.
Can I talk about anything I want? No. I'm wondering, are we in the middle of a vote? No, are we in the middle of a vote? I feel like something's suspended right now.
We're discussing the vote about whether we want the administration to have that option 3. So you could speak to that.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to speak to that. I'm a little bit torn because obviously there's this logistical challenge. But I guess I'm in favor of Vali's motion. And if that doesn't pass, then I feel like we will continue to kind of discuss individual items as a board. And I really would prefer lists coming from the administrators of recommendations. So like if Vali's thing doesn't pass, I mean, I have other things I want to talk about that I would like to have the board consider adding.
Today or next week?
Well, yeah, I mean, like in 2 seconds, like I could go on and be like, okay, well, here's what I think about, item F or G or whatever that's on the second tier thing. And I'm like, I'm hesitant to do that because I'd rather the administrators do that. So
if they then come back and say option 2, we don't feel the need to change option 2, do you then want to talk about all those things next week?
Not all of them. One of them I have to talk about.
Okay. So why don't we have the vote and then and then if you wanted to provide that direction, like, hey, could you at least speak to this one way or the other?
Could Dr. Foley explain the difference between what she's going back to the administrative team now with instructions compared to what she provided to them when they came up with option 2?
So I think it would be the same process. They're all here, they're all hearing what you're saying. And so I think we would have yet another discussion about, okay, so, nothing's going to change, or I'm predicting nothing's going to change on option 2. So those would still be, based upon our last conversation, I'm pretty confident that those would still remain there. And then I would say probably to them, okay, let's prioritize, let's talk about, what's left on that list and our priorities, and are we really ready to implement? Because I don't think we're ready to implement some of these things, right? So even we talked about SAT stipends for pre-K to 8, and there's a wide range of opinions, and we just haven't really worked that out. So we're not ready to do that one, for example. But I'll say, okay, let's talk again, and I would probably open up the discussion pretty wide again and say, it's kind of like Christmas, so let's, but always with the goal of what is going to move student achievement forward the most. Now, I think when we see a need that really doesn't directly correlate to student achievement, like we did with the maintenance, that the team is able to say, yeah, we know this isn't going to make our math scores better, but we really are committed to having good buildings for our students to be in, and to be learning, and our staff. So, for example, it could be that as we're talking with what's happened since we did List B, the panel generator may end up on that list, for example. Right? So, to me, it's just another discussion that is similar to the discussion that we already have. And they're good thinkers, so that, it's going to be the same process.
Okay.
So what are you asking differently this time that you are expecting a different result?
I think it's kind of like what happened between A and B. It's like, okay, let's talk about what the biggest needs are. Now we're at the next step. And so they came up with those next 3 things, and then I'll just say it looks like we might be at the next step sooner than we thought, and what's our best thinking. But the process really is going to be the exact same process that we've gone through twice, with the lens of, I think we'll come up with something, because I do appreciate hearing that you feel like it's the administrators that should be guiding this process, and I think they are the ones that know. I know, one of the questions we'll be asking Will is, are you ready for that 0.5 music teacher for next, can you be ready in September? And so those are the kind of things we'll be doing and be looking at that.
Jen?
So when you came up with the budget option 1, that was with the first talk with the administrators, and then you went back a second time and said, okay, are there things you want to add? So did you, on the second go around, say at some point, okay, we're done, stop asking for stuff, I'm not putting any more stuff on the sheet?
This is where I'm struggling.
Yeah. I'm going to look at them, because I don't think I said stop asking, but I think I said let's look at the top 3 priorities, and then I'm going to go back and have Michelle run the numbers on there and make sure that it's something that I'm comfortable with, right? And so. We didn't just, we are limited on time in our meetings, and so I didn't say, okay, what would be the next 3 and the next 3 and the next 3 and do that.
That answers it. You limited it to 3.
I think I did. I'm looking at my administrators. What did I say?
I kind of a bit like Lindsay, it was a blur.
Okay.
No disrespect to you. 3 sounds good.
David thinks 3. Oh, 3.
All of our things, all of the things we just went through and listed everything, and everybody got 3 votes.
Well, that was the first time. The second time, we didn't have any votes. We really did just come to a consensus on these are our next 3 things. And I think we had kind of a strong discussion about, well, should we put everybody was in strong agreement, I think unanimous agreement, that the next item was the intervention teacher 5 to 8. Then we had a robust conversation about whether the 2 and 3 should be flipped or not, before we arrived at consensus where everybody was in agreement that the RTI .2 position was preferred over the ed tech at Freeport Middle School. And then we did not prioritize beyond that. And I don't think anybody advocated strongly for anything beyond that.
Except Craig. With the
Except
shed.
Craig, right?
That's what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I know.
And right, and so we have a great backup plan for the shed. We don't really know how much space we need. We know we have a lot of stuff. We've never run a track meet. We have a wonderful plan to get us through next year with the portable and the storage space we currently have. In addition, we think we need 2 or 3 pods. We have a place to put them. It's at an expense of $100 and something per pod per month. And I guess from my perspective as the superintendent, who's, I don't know, I've never really thought of myself as fiscally conservative, but I'm starting to in this group. But to me, it makes sense to try it and really figure out what do we need and how big does that shed need to be, and live with it for a year before we come to you and say, okay, this is what we think we need. That's what I'm talking about when I say really thinking out a proposal about how we would use it before we're asking for it. But Craig, I'm sure Craig would love a shed.
Or garage, something. Yeah, something to put this stuff in. I guess my only point I want to throw out there is 1.79 expenditure increase is amazing, and I'm super happy with that. But I do want to point out that the tax impact of that is still 3.4%, right? It's still almost double the inflation rate of the year, right? So it's not immaterial. It's not, it's reasonable. I think we can certainly make the case for it, but I'm not sure we want to be making the case for this plus more just because we can. I guess that's my only concern. So, well, maybe not my only concern, but okay. It's my primary concern. There we go. Okay, so are we ready to vote on the request, on the motion on the floor? Yes? Okay, I'm seeing no hands for questions. All those in favor? Do people need to hear the motion again? No? You good? Okay. All right, keep your hands up so Cynthia can count. 6. Opposed? So the motion carries. Are you good, or do you have more now?
No, that's
okay.
That'll take care of it.
Okay, but you specifically want to hear about the shed?
Well, Becky talked about it a little bit.
Okay.
I think that addressed my concern.
It did. What's that? Right. What? Right now?
Never mind. We'll figure it out.
Okay. Oh, they're trying to figure out their time to meet. Okay.
We're doing MEA testing right now, so, but we'll figure out a time.
I would just add, if that shed should happen to show up on that option 3, I would ask that not only Craig weigh in on it, but also our drama teachers at both the high school and the middle school. Because I know we're running into some space constraints.
I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't be for both, though, would it?
Could it be? That's my question.
Well, the pad for it is on the other side of the field, so that might be a bit of a haul for the drama folks for their stuff. I don't know, maybe it's better than what they have now, but.
I bet they have an opinion. I don't know what the fix is, but I'd like to hear it.
Okay. So I guess I'm going to throw a request in just because since that passed, I'm interested specifically in the items where we talked about being a one-time cost that we're going to incur at some point anyway. So I think that's just a couple of things. I guess probably the shed's one of them. The sound system's the other. just curious to know what those are. So even if they come back and say, hey, option 2 is what we want, I mean, if we as a board feel like those are, to Valley's point, you know, things we know we're going to do, and if we can do it when we know it's not, you know, it's not going to make or break a really important initiative we're doing next year. So, okay. So we are back to public comment. We've still got this few folks.
So while I was busy not listening to Will, I was going through the archives of minutes and agendas, because I had seen at one other point when I was snooping around that. So the policy that involves the grading system is policy IKAB, and the first mention of it was on April 12th. There was a first read. On April 26th.
What year?
2017. Okay. April 26th, there was a scheduled second read, which was tabled. It was scheduled for second read on May 10th, and it was tabled again, and I know there's lots of reasons why that could happen. And then on May 24th, which you meet before the annual meeting, so I don't know how long that meeting is and how scrambled it is. That policy was voted and approved 10-0. So on May 24th is when the 1-to-4 grading system came into being. When I was scrolling around on one of the other agendas, there was a consideration and approval to rescind 3 policies in particular. So that's the wording we're looking for. And the earlier discussion about a workshop and how a vote comes to be, to me, was very kind of elusive. I know there's a system. I can't remember what it was, but I would like to know tonight how a vote is initiated on rescinding that policy, and I would think there would be clarity on that. So, because I don't want to sit through a workshop and then, you know, wondering when there's going to be further action taken on it. Like I said, I'm looking for it to happen you know, in a timely manner so that when teachers start grading for Q4, they're on board. But my other curiosity is what was the discussion around that policy during the first and second reads? It was approved, you know, within 2 reads. So I'd like it to be clarified, maybe if Ginny was here, she could do it, but she's not, about how that vote gets into an agenda in a timely manner. Because it was easy to bring it in. It should be just as easy to stealthily remove it at this point in time. The workshop will be helpful, but I would like board members to come to that workshop already informed, either with the backstory of whatever information you got when that policy was presented and implemented to you. The survey information, when you were talking about aggregating data and responses to the surveys that were given, granted, one of them really is moot, the community survey didn't specifically target anything really about proficiency or the grading system. But I know the teachers are curious too about whatever happened to the survey that was given to them. And it seems to me, even if it's just, you know, note-taking commentary, that could be transcribed into something reasonable. And if any redacting needs to happen, that's fine, as long as the, you know, foundations of the messages that they gave are clear. There was a survey put out in the last 2 years. It was sort of the same thing, like a community survey. I can't remember if Shannon was here or if it was Dr. Foley. But that also was not, it was not a data, collecting survey. It was parent comments, check, a scaled survey, as I recall, and with a box at the end for commentary. And I do recall that was publicized. I think it was sent in an email to parents. And quite honestly, I was taken aback because the comments were clearly what people had written, and it was kind of easy to identify. There was comments about coaches and that sort of thing. So that has happened. So there is a way to put out these surveys that aren't necessarily like numbers and things that you can aggregate, but kind of more open-ended reply kind of stuff. So I would hope that at that workshop, the board is already on board. There's lots of community members that are doing lots of research, and they know where to find stuff. And you can go to that website. It's actually got, it's already loaded up with some good stuff, and it's only been around for a couple of days. So I would really like you to have a discussion right now about how that vote is going to happen, and at least a general time frame. I don't know if I'm feeling like I might be scrambling up town council policies, but that it needs to be posted that you're going to be voting on a certain item, and I think there needs to be a certain time period to notify the public. I don't know, but that's something that kind of our basic rules for board things. Lindsay had a great list of information she'd like to have. What I would also like to hear is, what is the financial cost of this, and what are those line items in the budget? Just some costs that potentially come to mind are like these consultants and travel for administrators and or teachers that are part of their learning process. And I don't know what's happening with technology and PowerSchool changes and tweaks and upgrades, but I think that needs to be part of the discussion too, is like, what is the financial cost of this? We know what the personal cost is. So I think that's it. But if you're gonna put out a survey, it's a feedback loop. The intent, I would think, I'm not going to fill out a survey if it's just going out into the ether, really. I would anticipate that I get to hear back what the results were. And I think that just kind of lends a little more transparency and accountability to the board and to the administration, too. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, that is all we have on our agenda. Our next meeting is next Wednesday. The proficiency discussion is April 11th at Pownell Elementary School. I will remind folks that all of our meetings are videoed, and they're archived on the website, so you can see any previous meetings if you are so inclined. So we would take a motion to adjourn. Kate, Naomi, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you. Are you opposed to adjourning?
I'm just